Every beginner Scotch list you have ever seen gives you the same 10 bottles in the same order with the same one-line descriptions. This is not that list. These 15 bottles were chosen because each one teaches you something the others cannot. By the time you reach the end, you will understand more about Scotch than people who have been drinking it casually for years, and you will not have wasted a single dollar figuring it out. Number 15. Monkey Shoulder. This is where it starts, not with a rare single malt or a dusty bottle behind glass, with a $30 blended malt made from 3 Speyside distilleries by the same family that owns Glenfiddich and Balvenie. The name comes from an old injury that floor maltsters used to suffer when they spent too many hours turning barley by hand. Their shoulders would lock up and stiffen, and the condition became so common it got its own name. The whiskey itself is the opposite of stiff. It is soft, creamy, full of vanilla and orchard fruit, and it goes into a cocktail as easily as it goes into a Glencairn glass. Pour it neat and you get honey and citrus. Pour it into a Rob Roy and the malt character holds its shape against the vermouth without flinching. The reason it belongs at the start of your journey is that it teaches the first and possibly most important lesson in Scotch. Blended does not mean bad. A blended malt is made entirely from single malt whiskies sourced from more than one distillery. No grain whiskey, no shortcuts, just 3 respected Speyside distilleries working together in one glass. Glenfiddich brings the fruit, Balvenie brings the honey, and Kinninvie, a distillery you have almost certainly never heard of because nearly all of its production disappears into blends, ties everything together. If you walk into a bar and someone tells you blends are not real Scotch, politely ignore them. The entire industry was built on blending, and this bottle proves it. Number 14. Johnnie Walker Black Label. Now you learn the other side of the blending story. Black Label is a true blended Scotch, meaning it combines both single malt and grain whiskies, and everything in the bottle has been aged at least 12 years. Over 40 different whiskies go into each batch, drawn from distilleries across every region of Scotland. Smoky malts from the islands, sweet grain from the lowlands, fruity Speysides and coastal Highlanders all sitting in one bottle. That is not laziness, that is orchestration. A master blender has to taste thousands of individual casks and then combine them into something that tastes consistent bottle after bottle, year after year. It matters because blended Scotch is the reason the entire category exists. Before single malts became fashionable in the 1980s, blended Scotch was Scotch. Johnnie Walker, Dewar's, and Famous Grouse built the global whiskey market from nothing. They convinced the world that Scotch was worth drinking, and single malt distilleries rode that wave to where they are today. Black Label specifically teaches you to taste smoke alongside sweetness, dried fruit alongside grain, and complexity built through layering rather than raw distillery power. If you skip blends entirely, you are ignoring the foundation that made everything else possible. Number 13. Speyburn 10. Here is where you learn that price and quality are not the same thing. This single malt from a distillery founded in 1897 sits at around $25 and consistently embarrasses bottles twice its price. It is the only distillery that draws its water from the Granty Burn, a tributary of the River Spey, and the whiskey it produces is light, clean and gently sweet with orchard fruit and toffee on the finish. It has won gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition and silver at the International Wine and Spirits Competition, competing against bottles that cost 3 and 4 times more. It sells 35 times more bottles in America than it does in Scotland. That ratio tells you something about how little attention it gets at home, despite how much respect it earns abroad. The lesson here is simple. Stop judging a bottle by its price tag. Some of the best drinking in Scotch happens under $30, and Speyburn is the proof. If you cannot taste the difference between this and a $60 Speyside single malt in a blind test, that should tell you everything you need to know about the relationship between marketing budgets and whiskey quality. Number 12. Glenmorangie Original. This bottle teaches you what happens when engineering meets whiskey. Glenmorangie runs the tallest stills in Scotland, standing over 5 meters high. Taller stills force the heavier, oilier vapours to fall back before reaching the condenser. Only the lightest, most delicate vapours make it through. The result is an exceptionally smooth and elegant spirit that smells like vanilla and citrus before you even take a sip. The distillery recently upgraded this expression from a 10-year-old to a minimum 12-year maturation, and the difference shows. There is more depth, more oak influence, and a richer mouthfeel than the previous version offered. If you compare this side by side with something from a short, squat still, the contrast is immediate. Glenmorangie tastes like silk. Heavier spirits taste like wool. Neither is better. They are just different tools producing different results. That is the lesson. Still shape is one of the most underappreciated factors in determining what your Scotch tastes like, and Glenmorangie takes that principle to its logical extreme. Number 11. Glenfiddich 12, the single most important bottle in the history of single malt whiskey. That is not an exaggeration. In the 1960s, the Grant family made a decision that changed the entire industry. They started marketing Glenfiddich as a single malt at a time when virtually every other distillery was selling its spirit to blending houses. Nobody bottled and sold their own product. Nobody put their distillery name on the front of a bottle and said, "Come, drink this on its own." The Grants did. They designed the triangular bottle specifically to stand out on shelves. They pushed into airports, duty-free shops, and international markets when other distilleries were perfectly happy selling bulk spirit to the big blending companies. Every single malt you see on a shelf today exists partly because the Grants proved there was a market for it. The whiskey itself is fruity, approachable, and built for new drinkers. Pear, butterscotch, and a gentle malt sweetness that does not challenge anyone. It is not the most complex Scotch you will ever taste. It was never trying to be. It was trying to open a door, and it succeeded so completely that the door can never be closed again. Number 10. Glenlivet 12. If Glenfiddich opened the door, Glenlivet was already standing in the room. George Smith founded this distillery in 1824, after the Excise Act of 1823 made it legal to distill whiskey for a small licensing fee. He was the first person in the Livet Valley to take out a legal license, and his neighbours, most of whom were running illegal stills, were not thrilled about it. He reportedly carried 2 pistols for protection on his daily walks. The whiskey he created was fruity and tropical, where Glenfiddich is orchard sweet and malty, pineapple and peach instead of pear and butterscotch. Drinking them side by side teaches one of the most important early lessons in Scotch. 2 distilleries in the same region, using the same water source and the same raw ingredients, can produce whiskies that taste nothing alike. The shape of the stills, the speed of distillation, the type of cask, the length of maturation, and dozens of other small decisions compound into something completely unique. That difference is what makes Scotch endlessly interesting, and Glenlivet sitting next to Glenfiddich on the shelf is the clearest possible demonstration of it. Number 9. Edredor 10. This is where the story shifts from history to craft. Edredor sits in the hills above Pitlochry in Perthshire and operates as Scotland's smallest traditional distillery. 3 people run the entire operation using methods that have remained essentially unchanged for over 150 years. The stills are tiny. The production is measured in weeks where other distilleries measure in hours. They produce in a full year what most distilleries produce in a single week. Every bottle of the 10-year-old is matured exclusively in Oloroso sherry casks, non-chill filtered and bottled at 46%. The whiskey is rich, honeyed and surprisingly full-bodied for a distillery of its size. It tastes like sugared almonds and Christmas cake with a warm spice finish that lingers well past the last sip. Owned by Signatory Vintage, one of Scotland's most respected independent bottlers, Edredor answers to craft rather than commerce. The lesson is that Scotch does not need to come from a massive industrial operation to be legitimate. Some of the most characterful whiskey in Scotland comes from a place you could mistake for a farmhouse if you were not paying attention. Number 8. Glendronach 12. If you want to understand what sherry cask maturation does to Scotch, this is the bottle that teaches it. Everything at Glendronach matures exclusively in Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso sherry casks sourced from the bodegas of Andalusia in Spain. No bourbon barrels at any stage, just sherry front to back. The result is a whiskey that pours a deep amber red and tastes like dried fruit, dark chocolate, and warm gingerbread. It is non-chill, filtered with no added colour, bottled at 43%, and consistently compared to the Macallan 12 Sherry Oak at international competitions. The difference is that Glendronach delivers the same depth and intensity at a significantly lower price. Founded in 1826 in Aberdeenshire, the distillery has been synonymous with sherried whiskey for nearly 200 years. The lesson here is possibly the most practical one on this list. Cask type might be the single biggest factor determining what a Scotch tastes like. The spirit goes into the barrel clear and colourless. Everything you see in the glass and the vast majority of what you taste on your palate comes from the wood it matured in. Understand casks and you understand Scotch. Number 7. Glenfarclas 12. This distillery has been owned by the Grant family for 6 generations. No parent corporation, no private equity, no committee of accountants deciding which casks to use based on quarterly projections. The current chairman's family has been making decisions at Glenfarclas since 1865, and they have no intention of selling. They still use direct fired stills, which is an older and more expensive method that most distilleries abandoned decades ago because it requires constant hands-on attention. The heat source sits directly beneath the copper pot, rather than being pumped through internal steam coils. The result is a richer, slightly more caramelized spirit that tastes different from anything produced in a steam-heated still. Like Glendronach, Glenfarclas matures entirely in sherry casks. The flavour profile is drier and more nutty, where Glendronach is sweeter and fruitier. Drinking them back to back teaches you that 2 distilleries can both commit to sherry maturation and still produce completely distinct whiskies. The lesson is that independence matters. When a family answers only to itself and its own standards, it tends to make decisions that a corporate boardroom never would. I go through the comments on every video, and the most common question I get from new Scotch drinkers is where to start. If this list is answering that question for you, consider subscribing. I cover Scotch, spirits, and everything in between every single week. Number 6. Bruichladdich Classic Laddie. This bottle teaches transparency, and it comes from the last place you would expect to find it. Bruichladdich sits on Scotland's famous Whiskey Island, a place better known for peat smoke and campfire intensity. The Classic Laddie is none of that. It is completely unpeated, made from 100% Scottish barley, non-chill filtered, bottled with no added colour, and presented at 50% ABV. That last number matters. Most Scotch sits at 40 to 43%. Bruichladdich bottles at 50% because they believe diluting the spirit below that point strips away the barley character they work to create. And they do not ask you to trust them on blind faith. Every single bottle carries a code. Type it into their website and you can see exactly which casks went into your specific batch, where the barley was grown, which farms supplied it, and how the whiskey was composed. No other major distillery in Scotland offers that level of openness. The distillery is also a certified B Corporation, which means it meets verified standards for social and environmental performance. The lesson is that when a producer has nothing to hide, they show you everything. And the brands that refuse to show you anything at all might have a reason for keeping quiet. Number 5. Clynelish 14. This is the bottle that whiskey enthusiasts talk about when beginners are not in the room. Clynelish sits on the northern coast of the Scottish Highlands near the town of Brora and produces a whiskey defined by a waxy texture that almost no other distillery in the world can replicate. That waxiness comes from an unusual still configuration and a deliberate process of retaining naturally occurring oils during distillation. Most distilleries strip those oils out. Clynelish keeps them in. The spirit has a coastal saltiness underneath bright citrus fruit and creamy honey, and it clings to the palate in a way that lighter whiskies simply cannot. At 46% alcohol by volume, and with a 14-year age statement, It competes with bottles that cost significantly more and beats most of them. It also forms the backbone of Johnnie Walker Gold Label Reserve, which means the vast majority of Clynelish spirit disappears into blends rather than appearing under its own name. The lesson is that some of the best Scotch in the world never markets itself to the general public. You have to go looking for it. And once you find a distillery like Clynelish, you stop caring about brand recognition entirely. Number 4. Highland Park 12. This is where you learn what balance tastes like. Highland Park comes from Orkney, a cluster of islands off the northern tip of Scotland. And it does something that very few distilleries manage to do well. It combines gentle peat smoke with sherry cask sweetness in a way where neither one dominates the other. You get heather honey and dried fruit alongside a whisper of smoke that sits underneath everything without ever taking over. The distillery is also one of the last in Scotland that still floor malts a portion of its own barley, cutting its peat from the nearby Hobbister Moor. That means they control the smoke character from the very first step of production rather than outsourcing it to a commercial maltings. The peat on Orkney is different from what you find on Scotland's Whiskey Island too. With few trees on the islands, the peat is formed primarily from heather and low-lying plants, rather than the deep, boggy layers found in southern peat sources. That gives Highland Park's smoke a floral, almost perfumed quality rather than the medicinal or iodine-driven punch that beginners often find overwhelming. At 43% ABV and around $45, Highland Park 12 is one of the most accessible introductions to smoke that exists. The lesson is that peat does not have to be aggressive or divisive. Done well, it is just another layer of flavour sitting alongside everything else in the glass. Number 3. Everything you think you know about Scotland's famous Whiskey Island gets challenged with this bottle. The island has a global reputation for heavy peat smoke and medicinal intensity, and most of its distilleries lean hard into that identity. It ignores all of it. It is completely unpeated, bottled at 46.3% alcohol by volume, not chill filtered, and tastes like dried fruit, sea salt, and toasted nuts with a clean maritime finish. The distillery sits on the northeastern shore facing the Sound of Jura, and the coastal influence comes through as a clean, briny accent rather than the bonfire assault you would expect from its neighbours just down the road. It is the assumption wrecker, the bottle that proves a region does not define a distillery. If someone tells you they do not like Scotch from Scotland's Whiskey Island because it is too smoky, hand them a glass and watch their face change. The lesson is that geography tells you where a Scotch was made, not how it was made. You will find exceptions everywhere you look in this industry, and those exceptions are often the most interesting bottles on the shelf. Number 2. Ardbeg 10. Now you jump into the deep end. Ardbeg sits on the southern shore of Scotland's famous Whiskey Island and produces some of the most intensely peated single malt in the world. At 46% alcohol by volume and non-chill filtered, it is also one of the most critically awarded whiskies of the past 2 decades. The peat here is not just smoke for the sake of smoke. It is lemon zest and brine layered over smoked meat and espresso, with a surprising sweetness underneath that catches you completely off guard. There is a reason Ardbeg has a fanatical following that borders on obsession. It rewards attention. Every sip reveals something new, and the interplay between the aggressive peat and the sweet malt underneath is unlike anything else in Scotch. If you have been working through this list in order, your palate is ready for this. The light Speyside built your vocabulary. The sherry bombs taught you about wood. Highland Park introduced smoke as a supporting character. Ardbeg puts it centre stage and dares you to look away. It is the bottle that divides opinion more sharply than almost anything else in Scotch. Some people taste it and never go back to anything else. Others taste it and decide peat is not for them. Either way, you learn something essential about your own preferences, and knowing what you do not like is just as valuable as knowing what you love. Number 1. Lagavulin 16. This is the graduation pour. 16 years in oak. Rich, layered campfire smoke wrapped around dried fruit, dark chocolate, and maritime salt. It is the bottle that has converted more skeptics into Scotch drinkers than anything else on the market, partly because of its quality and partly because a fictional character named Ron Swanson made it famous on a television show that millions of people watched. What Swanson did for Lagavulin on screen is what this entire list is trying to do in a different format. He made a complex, intimidating spirit look like the most natural thing in the world to enjoy. Lagavulin 16 earns the top spot, not because it is the most expensive or the most extreme bottle here. It earns it because it rewards the journey. Every bottle before this one taught you something. The light fruity Speysides trained your palate to notice flavour rather than just alcohol. The sherry bombs from Glendronach and Glenfarclas taught you what wood does to spirit. But broke your assumptions about regions. Highland Park introduced you to smoke on its own terms. And Ardbeg showed you what happens when peat stops whispering and starts shouting. Lagavulin 16 is where all of those lessons converge into a single glass. It is complex enough to keep a veteran interested and inviting enough to pull a beginner all the way in. Those are 15 bottles, not 15 opinions, 15 teachers. Each one reveals a different corner of what Scotch can be. Start anywhere on the list that matches your budget and your curiosity, and work your way through at whatever pace feels right. Buy one bottle a month. Try them at bars before committing to a full bottle. Share them with friends who think they do not like Scotch. There is no exam at the end, just a growing understanding of one of the most rewarding spirits ever made. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing, and we will see you in the next one.